Hola, chicos. Before I start this, I want to say that if you have not watched the El Sistema Verbal Ed Puzzle video from last week, do that first before you do anything else, because that is very important. And that's the foundation for this. So once you've watched El Sistema Verbal Ed Puzzle video, then come back and do this. And a little caveat with this, I'm going to go over all the forms in this video for efficiency's sake, so that I don't have to make like 5 videos. So I'm going over all the forms. We're not going over all the forms in class. I mean, we're going to be doing that over the next 2 weeks. So this is the next 2 weeks worth of grammar. Right now, we have seen the yo form, and tomorrow, Tuesday, the 8th of December, we are going to see the to form. And then Thursday, I think we'll probably see the LA usted form, and then next week we'll see the other forms. So just FYI, this side of the column is what we're seeing this week. This is what we're seeing next week. All right. So assuming you've watched the Ed Puzzle video, you know what it means when we conjugate a verb and what an infinitive verb is. So one more thing about that, and I've put a notes page in Canvas to accompany the Ed Puzzle video. If it's useful to you, print it off, fill it out. If it's not, don't worry about it. But I wanted to make that available to you. So there's a notes page that goes with that Ed Puzzle video. Okay, and then the Google form today about the verb forms also is a review of that Ed Puzzle video. So, all right, so here we go. Starting on verb forms. So last week we saw that the yo form ends in O, and that is in the Ed Puzzle video. So, and we saw to change it into the yo form, we drop the AR, the ER, or the IR, and we add the yo ending. I'm just going to start typing it here. So the yo ending is O for all 3 of those kinds of verbs. So this is going to be HABL. Right? We drop the AR, and then we're going to add O. And for comer, that's going to be COM because we dropped the ER. And then we add O. Same thing. Our ending is O. I'm just going to put that in there. And then for asistir, we have assist after we drop the IR, and then we add O again, and we have asisto. All right. So our yo ending is O. I also have this handout in Canvas, so you can follow along and fill it out for yourself if you want. Okay, the to form, remember to is you, and so we've seen this form in our questions, and all of our weekly questions, they all use the to form, like this week's, ¿qué haces en un día típico? ¿Cómo te llamas? ¿De dónde eres? ¿Cuántos años tienes? All of our to forms end in S. I think that there's an exception. There's one exception, past tense. Past tense to forms do not end in S. But every other tense in the Spanish language, the to form ends in S. So if you hear a verb form that ends in S, that is somebody talking directly to you. All right, so for AR verbs, the to form ends in AS. And for ER-IR verbs, the to form ends in ES. Right? And that's generally true. ER-IR verbs pattern together and AR verbs pattern by themselves. So same thing, we start with HABL, we drop the AR, and we add AS for the to form. And then here, we drop ER, and then we add ES for the to form. And here, we drop the IR, and then we add ES for the to form. All right, now I should have done this, I forgot about this. All right, for irregulars like hacer, the yo form is hago. And then salir, same thing. The yo form is salgo. So it's irregular, you just have to memorize it. If you produce it as a regular verb, like you say aso and salo, people will understand you because it's the kind of mistake kids make. As long as you're following the rules, you're understandable. All right, then, ella, usted, the he, she form. I got a little rhyme for you. He, she ends in A or E. So AR verbs change to A. ER-IR verbs change to E. So he, she, A or E. So we start with habla. So our hablar, drop the AR. Then we add our ending, A. Here we start with com. After we drop the ER, we add E. And then here we're going to do the same thing. We start with assist, and then we add E because it's the he, she form. Okay. Nosotros. So the nosotros form has a slightly different ending for all three verbs. So this is amos. But you can guess here what's going to happen here. This is amos. And I really bet you can guess what's going to happen here. This is imos. So AR verbs are AMOS, ER verbs are EMOS, IR verbs are IMOS. Okay. The nosotros form is the we form. The we form ends in mos in every tense in Spanish, no exceptions. If you hear something that ends in mos, that is a we verb form. That's saying we are doing something, or we did something, or we were doing something. So same thing, we start with ab after we drop the AR, and we add amos. Start with com after we drop the ER, and we add amos. And here we start with asist after we drop the IR, and we add imos. Okay, now I'm going to put in the vosotros form so that you've seen it, but know that the vosotros form is a form that's used in Spain to talk to a group. So if I were in Spain, if I had studied in Spain, I would use the vosotros form to address you as a class. It's like how you say y'all. But I study in Latin America, so I use the ustedes form. The reality is that you won't need to know this in the United States. It's just not a form you're going to hear a lot. If we were in Great Britain, it would be a different story because they have a lot more contact with speakers from Spain. But here you don't really need to know it. I am going to present it to you and periodically remind you of what it's used for because if you do go on to take Spanish at the college level, you will very likely have a teacher from Spain that will use this form, and taking it from me and my sister, it was thought they were speaking a different language when they started speaking to us in this form. So I want you to at least recognize it so you're not freaking out at some point if you start hearing this form in college. All right. So the vosotros form is habláis, and again, that means you all in Spain. And then coméis and asistís. And you'll notice they all have accents on them. You don't need to know that because you don't need to know them, but they all have accents. All right, and then the they form. The they form in Spanish ends in N in every tense in Spanish. A little hard to see that there. But AR verbs are AN. Hopefully you can guess that ER verbs are EN. And IR verbs pattern with ER verbs, and they are also EN. So we take our root, ab, and then we add an. Take com and add en. And then we take assist and add en there. Okay? And this is what goes on for regular verbs. So any verb that's a regular verb follows this pattern. Now, irregular verbs have their own pattern, and you might say, how do I know if something is an irregular verb? You cannot look at a verb and determine that it's irregular by looking at it. In general, high-frequency words, like words we use a lot, like go and do and be, tend to be irregular, but it's not universal. So irregulars, you just have to memorize, and here are a few. We've already seen the verb ser. We have a notes page with this information. So it's I am is soy, you are is eres, he or she is es, we are is somos, you all are in Spain is sois, and they are, or you all are in Latin America, is son. Now, ir is one of our new verbs this unit, like ir al cine, go to the movies, and you will notice that it sort of patterns with ser. It doesn't quite do the same thing. But it does something similar. So the yo form is boy, the tu form is vas, the he, she form is va, the we form is vamos, the vosotros is vais, and the ellos, ellos, ustedes, they form is van. So you'll notice, even though that these are irregular, the yo form is a little bit weird, and here the he, she form ends in s instead of an a or e. But for most verbs, even when they're irregular, they're still going to follow the general patterns of regular verbs. So the tu form ends in s, the he, she form ends in a or e, the we form ends in mos, the they form ends in n. And if you can memorize this now, it's going to be much easier when we start seeing other tenses, like the past tenses and the future tenses, because if you already have like, oh, it's most, that's we, then you don't have as much to memorize because you already got that taken care of. All right, and then estar, we've seen a little bit like ¿cómo estás? How are you? So we've seen estoy, see, and then estás, and now here, but you can guess what the forms are. So it's going to follow the same pattern as the rest of the verbs. So this is a he, she form. He, she ends in er-y. Has an accent on it because it's a little bit irregular. The we form ends in mos, and the nosotros form is estamos, vosotros estáis, and then ellos, ellas, ustedes, the they form ends in n, just like the regular verb forms están. Now, both estar and ser mean to be. We will talk more about this when we get into our next unit, because when we're describing people, we will talk more about the difference between ser and estar. But I have a little rhyme that can help you right now if you find yourself using it. I don't know why you would, but if you find yourself using it, wondering, should I be saying ser or estar? How you feel, where you are, always use the verb estar to talk about how you're feeling or where something is located or where you're located. That's estar. Anything else, if you're saying is or am, are, that's going to be ser if it's not talking about location and condition. Okay, so that's basically through the end of semester in grammar for Spanish 1. And I think I don't know if I've said this. This is very important. And I talk a little bit about this in the Edpuzzle video, but you can see like changing this ending, this one little vowel contains so much information because it's telling you who's doing the action, like it's I, and it's telling you when I'm doing the action. I'm doing it in the present tense. If you were to change this to this, now it's I'm doing the action in the past tense. Or if you were to change it to this, now it's I'm doing the action in the future tense. Or if I changed it to this, now I'm doing it as a past hypothetical. Or if I change it to this without the accent, now it's a present hypothetical. So all that to say, like you'll notice I'm not too picky on spelling. My general rule of thumb is if it's recognizable, it's fine. If I judged that a native speaker would recognize what you're trying to say. But with the verb endings, it has to be right because it conveys so much information. Now, you might use subject pronouns, so you sort of get your idea across even if your verb endings aren't right. But most native speakers don't use subject pronouns, so if you do not know the verb endings, you won't know who's doing the action and when they're doing the action. Is it present, past, future? And all of that information is contained in the verb ending, which makes the verb endings very, 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 very important in Spanish. I would say probably the most important topic in Spanish is verb endings because they have so much information. Okay, so that is a rundown of regular verbs in Spanish, and then these 3 irregulars that we need to know, plus salir and hacer that just have the irregular yo form, but all the rest of the forms are regular. Okay, so next thing, conjuguemos. If you're just quarantining, you might have been here when we set up conjuguemos accounts. If you are remote, I think you probably missed it. Anyway, there is a link in last week. Well, there's a link in the, okay, I'm going to switch over. You're not going to actually follow me to Canvas to see the link, but I have to check and see where it's at. So in modules and links to online resources, there's a link to Conjuguemos. And then I think I put it in the announcements last week or 2 weeks ago. No, I did not. All right, let me... Sorry, I'm scrolling, looking for Conjuguemos. Okay, so in this week, week 16, in the Unit 3 materials, week 16, 7th through 11th of December, there's a link that says Conjuguemos el presente. So before you do anything, if you haven't set up an account, you will need to set up an account. So you can just go to follow the Kohogamos link and then say sign up. It's in the upper right-hand corner. And right now I am putting in the class code that you will use to find our stuff. And the ZRQMXN. Right, but I also wrote it in the link in Kohogamos for this week. Okay, actually I'm realizing I really should just make a separate video to go over what you should do for Kohogamos. So I'm gonna stop this one and go make a second one showing you where to find stuff and what you're supposed to be doing with Kohogamos. So part 2, to be continued.